This video is for anyone who's experiencing focus issues on their Mamiya 645 Pro or Pro TL. So I'm sure this video is going to get millions of views. Broad appeal, that's why I'm successful at the YouTubes. So my Mamiya 645 Pro TL, I bought it off eBay, and from day one, the focus on the negative never perfectly matched what I had seen in the viewfinder. I would focus on a given subject, and then I would get the negatives back, and it was always focused closer to the lens. I would focus here, the negative was focused here, and that would happen again and again and again and again. It was driving me insane. Now, I originally thought it's just because I'm a hack, and I was just being sloppy with the focus. But it turns out that's not the only reason. In the course of doing some research about this camera, I found out that it has kind of a known issue that can cause the focus in the viewfinder to not match up with the negative. So turns out it wasn't just my hackitude causing the focus to go off. It's actually an equipment malfunction or equipment repair that needs to be done. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how to adjust it if the part isn't broken on your camera. And if it is broken, how to replace it. So on these cameras, when you take the lens off and you raise the mirror with the mirror up switch on the side of the camera, inside the mirror box you will see this little plastic part off to the side that is the mirror stop. And this part's job is to hold the mirror in exactly the right position so that the focus you're seeing in the viewfinder is going to match up with the film. And if that little part breaks or goes out of calibration, then they won't match up. Now, if your part isn't broken, all you got to do is adjust it with the adjustment screw in the front. So for that, you just need a tiny screwdriver, a slot head 1.5 or 2.0 will do the trick. And you just insert it into that little hole in the front there and adjust the screw back and forth, and that will move the mirror forward or backward. Now later on in this video, towards the end, I'm going to show you how to adjust it, which direction to turn it, and how to get it to match the negative with the viewfinder. But we do need to figure out what to do if that part is broken, because Mamiya, in their infinite wisdom, woefully under-engineered this part. It is notorious for breaking because it's just too weak. It can't stand up to the rigors of a mirror slapping against it for thousands of actuations over decades. And so that part is kind of known to break. Now, when I took my lens off and examined that part, I saw that it had a hairline crack going right along the adjustment screw. So it wasn't fully broken yet, but it was on its way. So the first thing I did to fix it was I just reinforced that crack a little bit. I took some super glue, put a couple dabs of super glue right on top of the crack, being careful not to get it on the screws or any part of the mirror box. I let that dry, which super glue typically dries to a white color. So after it was dried, I took a little black Sharpie and just dabbed it on there to turn it black so I wouldn't get any reflections inside the mirror box. And that reinforced it so that I could then make the adjustment to the adjustment screw so that the focus would match up. But I've since decided that I want to replace that part because I don't know how well that super glue is going to hold up over time. And what the hell, might as well replace it. But the issue with that is, where the hell do you get a part? You know, these parts aren't exactly in abundance, and you could, completely cannibalize a different 645 Pro and just take that one part, but it's probably broken there too. So what do we do? Well, thankfully, we live in this wonderful world of 3D printing, and we can 3D print a plastic part to match it. We just need to have a design. Now, I don't know the first thing about 3D printing, and I sure as hell don't know about how to design a part to 3D print. But in the course of researching all this stuff online, I came across a file on Thingiverse. And Thingiverse is where people can upload, share, and download 3D print files. And some genius out there, some saint, some Adonis of a man, I'm sure, created a 3D print file to replace that part and uploaded it onto Thingiverse. So Daniel, wherever you are, God bless you. So I downloaded the file and tipped him, of course. If you're going to use these files, be sure to tip him because he put some work into this. But I downloaded the files and I need to get them printed. I don't have a 3D printer, so I started researching online, places to get 3D printed parts. Came across Xometry. This is not sponsored by them. Don't know why I felt the need to show their box, but Xometry does 3D printing, and I uploaded the file. I ordered 2 of them. One is a backup in case I broke the first one trying to install it. 2 parts shipped, $12.82. Under $13 to get these 2 parts. Phenomenal. And they showed up. They look exactly like the part. I did SLS nylon printing and had it dyed black, of course. And I got these 2 parts, and they look pretty much exactly like the original. It's an incredible design. I will say the nylon on these parts is a little more flexible than the original factory part. It's not noticeable. I mean, it doesn't bend like a rubber band, but if you put some flexion on it, you can see there's a little more give on the 3D printed part than there is on the original. I haven't yet decided if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The argument that it's a bad thing is that, oh, it's not going to hold the mirror in exactly the right spot because there's some flex to it. Or if you make an adjustment, it's not going to actually do the adjustment because it's going to flex too much. But the argument that it might be good is with a little bit of elasticity in that part, maybe it won't break as soon. You know, as the mirror slaps down on it, it's not going to develop those stress fractures because it's got a little bit of elasticity. So I don't know, remains to be seen. But that's the part I got, and we're going to replace it on the camera. Now, replacing it is not super difficult. There's a part that's a little tricky. I will just give the usual disclaimer at the front end. I don't recommend repairing your own camera unless you know what you're doing. I took the risk of breaking my camera to repair it myself, but you shouldn't necessarily take that risk. That being said, let me show you how it's done. So we of course have to take off the lens, put the mirror up so that we can get access to this part. Now the mirror stop has a spring around it. That spring is going to be the most trouble for you. Actually getting the part back in with the spring is the trickiest part. But first, let's just remove the parts and then we'll talk about it. So you're going to need a Phillips head, a tiny Phillips head. I used a number 0, which worked perfect, number 0 Phillips. And by the way, I'm using this mini screwdriver set that I really like. It's got a bunch of different attachments, and it's really cool because the handle has a nice extension built into it. It's magnetic, so it holds onto the screws, and it's got a nice little swivel back, which makes screwing and unscrewing a lot easier. I'll link in the description where to find this screwdriver set, but you're going to need something like this. You may also want to have some pliers, some mini pliers, and maybe even some tweezers on hand to help get the parts out. But the first thing we're going to need is this number 0 Phillips screwdriver. So inserting delicately into the mirror box, I unscrewed that Phillips head screw. It shouldn't be on there very tight, should come out pretty easy. So once you get that out, just set it aside, make sure it's nice and safe and it doesn't get lost. Don't worry about the part springing out and shooting out of the camera. The spring is actually holding the part to the camera, not launching it out of the camera. So you can remove that screw without any concern about the part just launching out at you. So now we need to remove the part. This is where it gets kind of tricky. So I use some pliers and some tweezers to gently pull the part off of the peg that it's attached to. And that peg is what the screw screwed into. So with the screw off, I was able to kind of wiggle that thing off the peg, but the spring is still hooked into the side of the camera. You'll see there's this tiny little slot towards the front of the camera, towards the front of the mirror box, that the spring is actually hooked into. And the only way to remove the spring from that slot is the part has to be turned, it has to be rotated back so that the hook can come up and clear the slot. So that part's a little tricky, but it's not impossible. So with the part off the peg, I rotated the part back and released it from that little slot. And then that gave me the part with the spring and the adjustment screw attached, but now outside of the camera. And you can see with the part out of the camera, it's a pretty damn close match to the 3D printed one. So really nice design. So first things first, we need to remove that adjustment screw. And just set that aside. That adjustment screw is going to need to be transferred to the new part. That leaves us with the part with just the spring on it. Now the spring hooks around the back. There's 2 little hooks around the back side of it. Just delicately push those off. This is where the tweezers kind of helps. And at this point, be careful to not let the thing spring off. Kind of keep your fingers around it, but push those hooks off and remove the spring from the part. So now you should have the old part, the adjustment screw, the spring, and the Phillips head screw that attaches it to the camera. So set aside the old part and bring in the new part. Now for the next step, I'm going to put the spring onto the new part. So just hook it on exactly like you unhooked it from the other part. It goes in the exact same position, it's pretty easy. And just hook it around the back side so it stays nice and secure. Once that spring is attached, we are going to put the adjustment screw into the new part. Thread this in really delicately because you're actually cutting new threads when you put this in. So don't do it too hard, don't do it too fast because you don't want to crack the part or anything like that. And don't tighten it down all the way. Put it so it's just sticking out the backside just a little bit. So now we got all the component parts we need to go back into the camera. And this is where it gets tricky. So we have to get that spring back into the slot and the part back onto the peg. I tried several different ways of doing this. The best way I came up with was on the part itself. I took the spring on the long end of it, unhooked it, and pushed it to the other side of the part. So it's actually kind of extended past the part towards where the camera, or where it's going to connect with the camera. And this gives me like free reign of that hook. So that hook is nice and exposed. It's going to be much easier to insert into that slot. Now it's very hard to show this and actually do it, but I basically just took that hook, inserted it delicately into the slot, and then let the part hang down. And that put the hook so that it hung down and latched onto that, that little slot. So it's dangling in there, but it's not on the peg yet. Getting it onto the peg takes a little bit of doing, a little bit of effort, but with your pliers and some tweezers, you have to bend the part forward. And I don't mean bend the part, you have to move the part forward, which is bending the spring. Move the part forward, rotate it a bit so that the hole in the part can rest on top of the peg. And again, it takes some doing and it might take a few tries, but then once it's on the peg, you can push it into the side of the camera. Now you have to make sure that the adjustment screw clears the little flap at the bottom that the adjustment screw pushes against. Make sure it clears that because it has to be in front of that. But just rotating the part, getting it on the peg, once it's on there, it's pretty tight and there's no immediate rush to get the screw, the Phillips head screw on there. It's not going to pop off. It's got some good, nice tension on there. But once it's in the right position, got it all set up, you put that Phillips head back in and tighten the thing down. Don't tighten it too much. You don't want to strip the Phillips head slots on there because if you ever need to undo it, you don't want to have a rounded off screw. So with the part in, it's now ready to be adjusted. And the adjustment part is not super difficult. It just takes a little bit of using your brain. No big deal. Now, the dead giveaway that this was off in the first place, like when I bought the camera, was that whenever I focused on something really, really far away, infinity, the lens was not lined up with infinity. The lens was always lined up shy of infinity, even though I was focused on something that I knew was infinity because it was a quarter mile away or half mile away or whatever. That should have been the red flag that it's actually a malfunction of the equipment, not my hackitude that's causing the focus to come off. So we're going to use that same principle to actually calibrate this. Basically, we need to adjust that adjustment screw until when we're focused on something really far away, the lens actually reads infinity. If the lens reads infinity when we're focused on something really far away, that means the calibration should be matched up with the viewfinder to the film. So all you need to do is mount the camera on a tripod and point it at something that's really far away. So in my office here, I just mounted it on a tripod and pointed it towards a light post that was across the intersection here. And I knew that that light post was far enough away to be considered infinity, so the furthest distance that the lens can focus on. But I also chose the light post because it's vertical. And this is going to be much easier to do on a vertical subject. Because with a vertical subject, we can use the split image focus assist on the viewfinder to see if it's lined up. So it's very clear to see if the post is out of focus or in focus with that split image lining up. Now you can do this with the standard viewfinder here, the AE Prism Finder, or you can do it with the waist level finder if you have one of those. I chose the waist level finder to do this because it has a magnifying glass built into it, and that makes it a little easier for me to see if everything's in focus where it should be. But if you don't have the waist level and you want something a little more precise than the prism finder, just take the prism finder off and look directly on the ground glass of the camera. And you can use a loop or magnifier or something to really check it if you want to. But you just want to make sure you get a real nice clear image of whether or not that vertical light post or whatever you're focusing on, whether it's lined up and in focus. So basically what you're going to do here is you're going to look through the viewfinder and adjust the focus until that light post is perfectly in focus. So when the two split images line up to a single image. You are now focused, as far as the viewfinder is concerned, on infinity. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily focused on infinity with the film. So what you do is, after focusing on this light post, you look at your lens and you see if it's lined up at infinity or not. Now, if it's lined up shy of infinity, then you need to adjust the adjustment screw. Also, if you can't focus on it, if it's impossible for you to focus on that light post at infinity, like the split image goes and goes and goes and then it can never get there, and you're hitting the lens to its limit, you're adjusting the focus ring until it stops and you still can't get that in focus, that also needs adjustment. That means you actually can't see infinity focus in the viewfinder. Either way, we have to adjust the screw. Now, after you've focused on this light post or whatever you're focused on at infinity, you will look at your lens. And if your lens indicator is shy of infinity, it didn't get all the way to infinity, that means you're actually going to be front focused. You're not going to be focused all the way on the light post. You're going to be focused closer. If that's the case, you need to turn the adjustment screw clockwise. So you rotate it clockwise and that will adjust the mirror closer towards infinity. If instead you are incapable of getting the split image to line up, meaning you can't focus on infinity through the viewfinder, it's not possible, even when you're hitting the dead end of the lens, that means your image is going to be focused behind where you're seeing in the viewfinder. In that case, you adjust the adjustment screw counterclockwise. So again, if your lens is lined up short of infinity, when you think you're focused on infinity, you're going to need to rotate the adjustment screw clockwise. If you are incapable of visually focusing on infinity, if the split never lines up no matter how far away the subject is, you need to rotate the adjustment screw counterclockwise. But either way, we're going to be smart about this. When we make an adjustment, here's the way it has to be done. You leave the camera on the tripod, take the lens off, put the mirror up, and then rotate the adjustment screw like a half turn. You know, like 180 degrees. Don't go full 360. Put the lens back on and repeat the process. Focus until the split image lines up, if it can. Then check your lens to see if it's lined up with infinity. You probably won't be there yet, so you have to take the lens off again, lock the mirror up again, do another half turn. Put it back on, put the mirror down, check again. And you repeat this process again and again until you reach the finish line, which is when you look through the viewfinder and you focus on that light post and you get it lined up so that split image is one nice solid line, you're now focused on infinity visually, and you check your lens and it's lined up dead nuts on infinity, you've calibrated your focus. So it's that simple. You just got to repeat the process several times. You may have to pull that lens off and put it back on a dozen times, doing half-turn screws every time. But once you can get infinity on the lens to match infinity visually, then you're synced up and things should be good for everything outside of infinity. I, of course, put a few test rolls through the camera to verify the results. And I made sure to use wide apertures so as to minimize depth of field and thus exaggerate any missed focus. I tried subjects that were close, subjects that were far, different types of film, different types of light. And I'm happy to say that it seemed to work out great. My focus was spot on about 95% of the time. And I'm more than happy to write off that 5% to me just being a hack. I also did test shots on both of my lenses, my 55mm and my 80mm, and got equally good results on both. So it seems this procedure works. Now, my only concern at this point is the durability and that little bit of flexibility in the 3D printed part. So I'm just going to have to keep an eye on it over time, make adjustments to that adjustment screw as necessary, and if I find that that 3D printed part isn't up to the task long term, I'm going to have to try printing it with different type of plastic or a different type of 3D printing process. But so far, so good. And for 12 bucks, not too shabby. Now, if you found this video useful and you want to help bring more videos like this to the masses, please consider making a contribution at nickcarverphoto.com/contribute. So there you go. That's how you fix a mirror stop focus issue on the Mamiya 645 Pro or Pro TL. So you're welcome, 3 people. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.